Saturday morning in 1963 started the same way in almost every house in America. You came downstairs before anyone else was awake, turned on the television for the cartoons, and went to the kitchen for breakfast. The cereal box was already on the table from the night before, and before you did anything else, before you got the bowl, before you got the milk, you picked up the box and turned it around to read what was inside. Not the nutrition label, not the ingredients, the prize. That word, prize, meant something different in 1963 than it means now. Today, a prize is a digital code on the inside of the lid, a coupon for a free download, a chance to enter a sweepstakes online. In 1963, a prize was a physical object, usually made. The 1950s and 1960s are considered the golden age of the cereal box prize. By the mid-1950s, cheap plastic manufacturing had made it possible to produce small toys at a cost low enough that a cereal company could include one in every single box and still make money. General Mills, Kellogg's, and Post all understood something important. You were not just selling cereal, you were selling the morning, and the morning that came with a prize was worth buying. The decoder ring was the one that started everything, and if you grew up in the 1960s, you either had one or you knew someone who did, and you wanted theirs. In the mid-1960s, Chex cereals, made at the time by Ralston, offered 3 different spy prizes across their 3 varieties. Wheat Chex had a decoder ring. Corn Chex had a secret message watch. Rice Chex had an invisible ink pen. Buy all 3, and you were equipped for espionage at the breakfast table. The decoder ring was a small plastic ring with a rotating outer dial printed with numbers and letters. The instructions on the back of the box gave you a coded message to solve. You turned the dial, matched up the numbers, and revealed whatever the cereal company had hidden for you, usually something along the lines of, "Chex is the crunchiest cereal in the world." But it did not matter. The point was the decoding. The point was sitting at the kitchen table at 7:30 in the morning, feeling like you had access to information other people did not. Here is what almost nobody mentions when they talk about the decoder ring. A lot of children were deeply, genuinely disappointed by the message on the other end. The movie A Christmas Story captured it perfectly. All that anticipation, all that waiting, and the message turns out to be an advertisement. But even the disappointment was part of it. Even the disappointment meant something had happened that morning that was not just cereal. The baking soda submarine was the one that the bathtub remembers. Kellogg's and other cereal companies offered small plastic submarines as prizes through the late 1950s and into the 1960s, and these were not decorative. They actually worked. On the bottom of each sub was a tiny compartment into which you placed a small amount of baking soda. Drop the submarine into a bowl of water, or more likely, the bathroom sink, and the baking soda reacted with the water to produce carbon dioxide bubbles, which pushed the submarine downward until the baking soda was exhausted, at which point the sub would rise back to the surface and the whole process started again. Up and down, on its own, in your bathroom sink, for 20 minutes on a Saturday morning before anyone else in the house was awake. This was not The Beatles' Rub-ons came in 1968, timed exactly to the release of the Yellow Submarine film, and they landed in boxes of Nabisco rice honeys and wheat honeys at exactly the right cultural moment. A rub-on transfer worked like this. You placed the sheet face down on whatever surface you wanted the image to appear, a notebook, a lunchbox, the inside of a school binder, and rubbed the back of the sheet firmly with a coin or a fingernail. When you peeled the sheet away, the image transferred to the surface underneath. Parents who had no strong feelings about breakfast cereal suddenly had opinions about rice honeys. Children who had never cared which cereal was in the house had a very specific request that week. The Nabisco marketing team understood that the breakfast table sat at the center of the household, and that what went on the breakfast table in the morning became part of how a family saw itself. A box of cereal with Beatles rub-ons inside was a box of cereal that the children in the house were going to ask for by name, repeatedly, until it was purchased. The Cap'n Crunch bosun whistle was the prize that turned out to be slightly more powerful than anyone intended. Cap'n Crunch cereal, introduced in 1963, came in the early years with a bosun's whistle, a boatswain's whistle, the kind used on naval ships to signal commands to the crew. The cereal version was small, made of plastic, and came in different colors. It produced a high-pitched tone when you blew into it in a specific way, and children across America spent the better part of several breakfast times learning the specific way. Here is the part of the bosun whistle story that nobody was expecting. A phone freak named John Draper discovered in 1972 that the Cap'n Crunch whistle, when blown correctly, produced a tone at exactly 2,600 Hertz, the same frequency that AT&T's telephone switching systems used to signal that a line was ready for a new call. Blow the whistle into a phone handset at the right moment, and you could access operator trunk lines and make free long-distance calls. Draper, who became known as Captain Crunch, used this discovery to become one of the first telephone hackers in American history. He later taught his methods to a teenager named Steve Wozniak, who shared the knowledge with his friend Steve Jobs, and the two of them went on to start Apple. The miniature license plates came from Wheaties in the 1950s, and if you were the kind of child who collected things, and most children of that era were, because collecting was one of the primary leisure activities available to a person under 12 in a world without screens, the license plates were exactly what you needed to make the next 6 months of breakfast matter. Wheaties produced miniature metal license plates representing all 48 states, each one about 2 inches long, accurate in color and design to the actual plates of the era. Collecting them meant convincing your parents to keep buying Wheaties until you had the full set, which was the point. A child who needed the Wyoming plate and the North Dakota plate was a child who was going to eat a lot of Wheaties that fall. Here is something worth understanding about that strategy. It worked not because children were gullible. Children are not particularly gullible. They just have different priorities than adults. But because collecting is genuinely satisfying. Finding the Montana plate after 3 boxes without it produced a real feeling of completion. Having 23 plates on a board on your bedroom wall and needing exactly 5 more was a specific and motivating situation. Wheaties was not manipulated. Here is the part that actually explains why all of it disappeared. The prizes did not go away because children stopped wanting them. They went away because of lawsuits, safety regulations, and the economics of the modern cereal industry. A small plastic toy inside a box of cereal is a potential choking hazard. It requires testing and compliance documentation and liability coverage that did not exist in 1963 because the legal landscape was completely different. The cost of including a physical prize in every box, once you add the regulatory overhead, is substantially higher than it used to be. And the alternative, a code on the inside of the lid, a chance to enter a sweepstakes online, costs almost nothing to produce and carries almost no liability. What was lost in that calculation was the thing that made Saturday morning feel the way it... None of that was the point. The point was that the box had something in it besides cereal. The point was that a child could come downstairs before anyone else was awake on a Saturday morning and find, in a cardboard box on the kitchen table, something that had been put there specifically for them. Not for their parents, not for the household, for them. A small plastic object that said, "Someone thought about you this morning before you even woke up." That is what the prizes were, and that is what is gone. Memory Lane, America, one story at a time.